Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, empowering your real estate investing with techniques, opportunities, and information, minus the BS and sales pitches. Now, please welcome the host of the Investor Empowerment Series, Joe Mueller, from the Tough as Nails Investment Syndicate, Joe Mueller.
This is the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, episode number 76. I'm your host, Joe Mueller of Tanis Group. Today's awesome guest is Scott Smith out of Austin, Texas. Scott is a real estate attorney, a real estate investor. He invests in 10 different states and multiple asset classes. He's also been on the Bigger Pockets podcast, number 109. Yeah, that's right. I got some bigwigs in the house today. There is a lot of crazy, awesome tidbits you're going to get from listening to this podcast. We go over asset protection, land trusts, investing in different states and using the proper entity creation, how to not lose money in real estate investing. You got to stay tuned in. But first, a word from our sponsors. Hey investors, I wanted to give a quick insider opportunity to the listeners out there who are currently doing deals or just getting started and looking to create more financial efficiencies for their real estate business. Introducing Investors Title Services, a much lower cost option for procuring the necessary title insurance policies for your real estate transactions. Think about how much money you've spent on title insurance in the past on either your current purchases or sales, and think about how much you'd be savings if just a couple $100s per transaction ended up back in your pocket. Well, now you can by optimizing the relationships that other investors have established that you currently need for your business. That's what we do here at Investors Title Services. If you're a fix and flipper, a wholesaler, or a buy and hold landlord, we specifically serve this small niche, offering you the best deal on title policy insurance. Call 847-443-9676 today to learn more about how you can save hundreds of dollars, if not more, on your next title insurance policy. Scott, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, great to be here today. I'm excited to share with you guys some really great info on, basically anything you need to know. I'm an open book. Any questions you have or anything like that, feel free to drill me down as much as you want.
Awesome. That sounds great. So what? Obviously you've been doing this for how long you been an attorney, and how long you been investing in real estate?
Yeah, so I've been investing in real estate since I was actually in law school. We actually bought our first commercial property in my second year during law school, and then that was way back in the day, and 8 years ago feels like a lifetime ago. But then sure. been an attorney, doing Royal Legal Solutions professionally full time for about 4 to 5 years now. So okay. I've really been focused on what does it take to be a really great investor, and then I happen to have this skill set called being an attorney, which gives me an edge in being a better investor, right? Sure. Well, I'm always really about how are we going to invest better to make more money, and that's always been the focus of our firm, which is how do we make the most amount of money? And law is just one of the pieces of the puzzle, along with the taxes and along with the deal itself.
Sure. So what type of properties are you investing? I mean, in 10 different states, that can't be that simple to manage. I mean, what are you buying? What's your story regarding that?
Yeah, so it's all different types of asset classes, right? So I get to see amazing deals all the time because that's part of my job, is to review people's great deals that they have and pick them apart and tell them why they're not that great or why I think they are amazing. And if they are really that amazing, that's when I throw money at stuff, right? So I invest in my own clients' deals, and that spreads me out all throughout the country.
I see.
I'll also have a few properties that are in different states, but I find that those are not as some people like to do that where they have this multi-state approach, and that's great, right? If you get a really good property manager and you found a really great niche deal, and say I'm in Austin, right? So if I found something in Columbus, Ohio, for example, but it's pretty rare for me to say wow, that's really a whole lot of managerial, and thought overhead and stress overhead to be able to do that. So when I'm investing in a lot of different states, I like to be able to pull in large groups of talent pools into a lot of the investments. But I've invested in everything from notes to apartment complexes to storage facilities to single family homes, and And so it's really what anybody has, no matter where it is or what you're doing. I find that I've seen it. And I know the answers to the questions you don't even know to ask yet, just because I've been doing it for so long, right? Like, It's like, imagine if this is all you did every day was just talk to people about this stuff. Like, you'd be pretty good at it. And that is my life, because that's all my clients are real estate investors.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm sure that there's a lot that you can offer to new and experienced real estate investors, especially with the experience multi-state and multi-asset class. What would you say would be some advice that you would give to somebody who's looking to get started in real estate investing?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing you want to do is start looking at all the really great ways you can lose money, because real estate investing is a really great way to also lose your ass. When it comes into what you're getting into, right? So like, you can really lose money like really well by trying to just jump into the deep end of buying your first asset all by yourself.
Right.
I think it's a really not smart way of doing it. Instead, what people should be doing is partnering with other people, like get other JV partners, get in like low money into a deal, maybe put like $5,000 or $10,000 into your first deal with a group of other people. So that way you can learn from all of them and everything they do, and they have to answer all of your questions because you have money in the deal. So like, you're part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another really great way to lose money for really experienced investors out there is to get really comfortable with one asset class. Like, I just had a client who had a multifamily and then lost his shit on it because he ended up going into a multifamily deal with somebody he knew from a local real estate, meetup group, right? And because he knew the guy and he knew the asset class, and he's like, oh, this is definitely going to be like a win, and I know the guy or whatnot. He didn't do all of the due diligence and checking, like to be able to say, like, did the bank letter that he got shown from the guy really mean that he was going to be guaranteed to be able to get refinanced out of the deal at the end, right? Or was it pretty loose? And because he felt comfortable, he didn't drill down farther when he should have asked more follow-up questions with it, right? And that's something that we had to do as experienced investors. And that's the way, like, experienced investors that really know their stuff end up eating it, right? Is in that kind of context. And then, of course, the stuff that I see the most of is, of course, just being as an attorney, is a lot of people that aren't protecting their assets, or they think insurance is enough to protect their assets and don't really understand the nuances of the difference between insurance and asset protection for the real estate. That ends up coming back to bite them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, can we talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. I would say the biggest piece that people don't understand is about that insurance itself. It protects you only against accidents.
Okay.
Right? In the legal world, we call that negligence, but that's the only thing that insurance protects you against. Now, granted, that's most lawsuits are like people being stupid, like and tripping and falling on your property or something like that, right?
Right.
So, but the really big stuff that wipes people out are usually not accidents, right? It's going to be something, let's say, like if you had all your property in your personal name, the biggest no-no you can possibly do in the world is own things in your personal name. Nobody that is rich on the face of the planet owns anything in their personal name. It's just not what you do. And I say face of the planet, I probably just mean the United States, right? But,
right.
In 2017, 2018, we just go superlatives all the time. So, number one, you never own anything in your personal name. Don't be a dummy. Don't own stuff in your personal name, right? But what'll happen what'll happen with when people get wiped out is that they will own things in their personal name, and they'll think, hey, I got this insurance policy, like I'm good and protected because my CPA or, whatever my real estate investor group told me that it's fine as long as I'm a good, honest person, nothing ever bad will happen to me.
Right.
The reality is that like lawsuits happen because of misunderstandings a lot of time, or just bad deals that kind of people sideways. And so if you had even completely unrelated event, right? Like you got into a car accident that exceeded the limits of liability of your car insurance policy. If you're running into like a different deal that has nothing to do with your real estate, but it was a breach of contract issue. If somebody accused you of fraud in any of your other business dealings, right? Those are all different things that would then threaten your entire real estate investments.
Right.
Well, really, they threaten all of your net worth, But the one thing that's really bad about real estate investments is that people can look onto public records and find out exactly how much money they can steal from you if they win, and
Sure.
how like exposed you are. So that's what we work on. We say, well, let's be super smart and protect all of our assets by having them in a company structure. So that way people can sue me and they can't get to my stuff, and I'm going to hide it. So that way people can't even find out that those assets are connected to me. So when they look to sue me, it looks like I got Jack.
Right. What's your suggestion on somebody? You're right. A lot of people are getting started or are in real estate. They got stuff in their personal name. I mean, what advice are you recommending they would take to stop that type of liability from being a problem for them?
Yeah. So the first thing you want to do is you want to hide that, right? And the way you hide that is by using a land trust. So
Okay.
we call it an anonymous land trust. And that's a really cheap, easy way to do it. I mean, you're talking like $300 to $500 in most all cases to be able to hide that asset.
Right.
Okay. So that's some really low hanging fruit of like, I'll just make it where people can't find out that I own it. So that way, if a lawsuit starts to spring up, they have to spend a lot of money before they can find out that I own that. Actually, they have to take the thing all the way to trial before they're going to be able to find out that I own that, right? Which is super expensive.
Right. Okay.
And so that's what we want, right? We want to be like, we create a lot of uncertainty on the front end.
Sure.
The problem with just using a land trust, though, is that it doesn't actually protect you from the lawsuit itself. It just like dissuades people from wanting to sue you because it hides it. But like if they actually proceeded with the lawsuit against you and won, they could still come after that property. To prevent that, what you actually have to do is combine the land trust with an LLC structure.
Okay.
And once you do that, the property is hidden and it's protected. And so that's really cool. And that's fine if you have one asset. But what happens if you have more?
My next question. Right. Okay.
Right. And if you have more than one, you can do one of two things. You can either say, I'm going to have one-off LLCs for each individual property. So that way every property is compartmentalized. So lawsuit against property A can't affect property B.
Right.
Problem with that is that it's super expensive to form and maintain LLCs for every single individual property that you end up spinning up. So
Okay.
the better option that we use is a series LLC, which you can form up in Texas or Delaware. I like Texas because it's cheap and powerful. So like Texas, Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming are all on par with each other in terms of where you want to form up the company, which really matters, by the way. And you can form up that Texas series LLC, and then you can use that just like you would, any other type of LLC in any other state. So that's like the way to do it if you have more than one property, is use that series LLC structure because it can expand infinitely and doesn't cost you anything as it expands. So it's beautiful that it grows with you throughout your life.
So couple questions related to that. What if somebody's already, let's start from the beginning. Let's say an investor purchases a property and they keep it as a rental in their portfolio that they're attempting to build, and they close on it in their personal name, and then they listen to this podcast and they say, oh man, this guy's right. Scott Smith, you're the man. I need to form a land trust. And then they transfer into the land trust. Does that still doesn't that reveal what that anonymity of the land trust would have been protecting at that point, because it shows like that transfer? Or did someone just assume that, it was bought by somebody else and now it's in a land trust?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, right? So we're always going to tell our investors to acquire the property in their personal name.
Really?
Initially, because that's how you're going to get all of the cheapest financing.
Right, sure.
That's going to happen, right? So it's really a financing. It's a money question of why to do that. And it's not necessarily ideal, but it's the money is what I'm saying. Like, we're going to maximize our returns first, and then we're going to backtrack all of the tax and legal to make sure that all of our returns are going to stay at the highest possible level. So what we end up doing is saying, well, you have like the property or two properties currently, or you're going to acquire a new property. All of those are going to be in your personal name. Okay. Then what we do is we transfer it over into this anonymous land trust, and we're going to structure that trust to make it look like it's used for an investment purpose. So inside of the investor community, and you might not know this, or maybe some of the listeners don't know this, but it's really popular to transfer an asset into a trust itself, because trusts are pretty fluid structures that people can create, and then they'll chop up it to a bunch of different beneficiaries, and each one of those beneficiaries would be a different investor. So then Paul can own 10% and Joe can own 25% and whatever, right, out of this land trust.
Sure.
So that's a common practice that people will use, and that's how we're going to structure the trust. So even though they saw like that Scott Smith once owned a piece of property, right, it looks like it got transferred into a trust that's no longer has Scott's name attached to it. So there's no way of knowing who actually are the beneficial owners, or if Scott's even still the owner of the property.
Right.
The most thing that they'd be able to say is there was a property that Scott owned once. It looks like it probably was, he acquired it to be able to then spin it off to other investors. And we don't know if he has any ownership of that property at all. Because what we're really driving at here, Joe, is that we want to create doubt in the mind of anybody that's trying to attack us. So it doesn't really matter whether like the story ultimately is true or not on what it is that we're spinning to them, but we're spinning them this story that says this looks exactly like something that he doesn't own anymore.
Right. Okay.
And we're going to make them believe that.
Because the way you're structuring the actual trust itself, which they see on public record, appears as if it's like a conglomerate of multiple people, not you anymore. Correct?
It's not me anymore. And ultimately, if they did said, oh, well, we think it still is Scott. Well, remember that this trust was actually, we're going to form it up in conjunction with an LLC.
Right.
If they guess that it was still me, they still end up losing because they can't sue me and get to it anyway, because it's been held underneath this LLC and trust combination structure. So even if they guess right, they're still wrong.
That sounds pretty cool. All right. I like that. That's good info. My secondary follow-up question was about, you mentioned about forming the LLC and why which state is important. You said that's really important on which state it gets formed in, but then you kind of went into the explanation of how you like Texas. I know Wyoming has become a new hot button, state as far as forming LLCs. I mean, for the average investor who's, based out of wherever, Tampa Bay, Florida, I mean, does it matter? How does that work on that end when they're setting up an LLC in another state? Is there anything they need to be specifically careful of, or?
Well, there's two pieces to this, Joe, which is first piece is saying like who has strong laws, and you can know the strength of these laws based upon the fact of what's called a charging order, and that tells you if there was a lawsuit against me personally, can they get to my membership interest inside of the LLC itself, right? If that were true, somebody could sue me and then by suing me get to my membership interest in the LLC, then the LLC doesn't do anything to really protect me. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're going to find in case of like a California LLC. That's why you don't form LLCs in California. Right. So you would always use something. That's the differentiation of why you use Delaware, Texas, Nevada, or Wyoming. One of those. Right. Issues are is that Nevada and Delaware are expensive to work with. Wyoming is pretty cheap. Right. Although they still have a yearly fee that's associated with them. You what the reason people that are going to Wyoming is because they want anonymity. Wyoming doesn't make you disclose who the members or managers of the LLC are. Right. So people are saying, oh, it's cheap and I get anonymity, right? What I like better than that is being able to form a Texas series LLC, because I get this huge bonus called I can create a series structure inside of my LLC, which is awesome because now I get this compartmentalization of every single asset absolutely for free without ever having to form another LLC.
Right.
And what I'm going to do is create a trust. We call it an agent trust that owns that LLC. So that way we get all the anonymity. So basically, and here we go, I forgot my third main point here. The third main point on that one is that Texas is free year over year.
Really?
Texas doesn't have a yearly fee. So we get a series compartmentalization. Wow. We get all of the anonymity that we were going to get via Wyoming, and we also have no yearly fees attached to Texas. So like Texas has like this, and like the asset protection laws in Texas are huge, right? Because like we don't like creditors in Texas. So anybody trying to come after our money, we don't like it, whether it's a government or anybody else. And so like really it's like the perfect storm of all of the goodness in one little spot, but just not a lot of people know about it. I don't know why. I mean, I can form up these companies anywhere, right?
Sure.
But I was like, why would we go anywhere else? I mean, sometimes just being at home is good enough.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. That sounds awesome. I mean, the opportunity to have no expense of that LLC year over year as far as that annual fee. I mean, that's huge. That's one of the reasons why the Series LLC, I think, in other states like Illinois, for example, where I'm based, I mean, it doesn't make sense because it becomes so expensive once you have a sizable number of properties. You're paying so much money just to the state to keep the series going. But so basically, the moral of the story here is that if somebody wants to follow this type of an entity and anonymity structuring, land trusts and LLCs, that they should probably be talking to you. Because you sound like you know what you're talking about, and I think it's awesome.
I don't think anybody else. There's a couple of like other firms that do this kind of work, but they have structures that are much more complex to accomplish the same thing and are more expensive.
Sure.
I mean, like they want to charge like $8,000 to $9,000 to put this stuff together, which I think is just crazy.
Right.
And it's not as efficient. So, but like we're significantly lower priced than that, and by multiples. And the other thing too to like keep in mind with what I'm talking about here too is just to kind of like put the water hose to your mouth with information. Is that so one of the other things too is like because it's Texas and we're a Texas law firm, then we're able to take care of everything here in-house for the law firm. So anything that happens like is always going to point back to our firm. And then by law, we can't disclose it to anybody else. Even though they could subpoena us, they could do whatever, they can't find out anything that's behind that because it's the shield of the law firm for anonymity.
Right.
And the cool part is that so you could take this Texas Series LLC. And so what the way the Series LLC works is that you have this parent-child relationship. And so you would have, this parent LLC that's filed and it has child A. Now child A would then say, I want to own a property in Georgia. You use a land trust to own the property in Georgia. And because you did that, then there's no foreign registration that has to happen with the LLC to own properties in every different state. Because only the land trust is operating in Georgia, not the LLC itself. So you even avoid all of these multi-state fees. If you're the type of investor that's trying to like branch out to like 8 different states, you can actually have one company structure through Texas, own property everywhere, and not have any variable costs that go up as you expand your real estate empire.
Yeah, definitely some incredible advice here. You're making me, I was about to ask a question like, so if you knew a guy that had X number of properties in a couple different LLCs and maybe some were in land trust, but a bulk of them were in one LLC that he also uses as an operating company to manage other properties for other people, AKA me, how do we push all that stuff into this type of structuring? But I'm sure we can talk about that offline after the podcast.
Well, it's really simple, actually, Joe. Like you would take this structure that I'm currently telling you about here with the Series LLC and the land trust. That becomes your asset holding entity. And then what you would do is have your own shell company. We call that an operating company. That because it's totally separate LLC. And then any contracts you do, contractors you hire, lease agreements you enter into or whatnot, all go through that shell company. So that way, if there's ever a lawsuit, who did the business? Who has the contacts? It's not the asset holding company, and it ain't Joe. It's this shell LLC, and that does everything for you. So that's really all you need. You separate your assets from your operations. You make sure your operations has 0 assets in it, and then you run everything through that. And then you're sitting pretty because nobody can get to you, and nobody can get to your money.
Yeah, we're going to have to work on that.
It sounds like a lot, but it is like a lot that goes into it. But that's why like attorneys and law firms like mine exist, because we've already know like how to streamline everything. So that way you come to us, we take care of all of it, and then your life, we make it where it's investor friendly. So that way you don't have any like extra ongoing maintenance you have to do or management or anything. Like we've really made this thing where it's like your life doesn't get more complicated just because you have all of this stuff in place.
So, yeah, I mean, it sounds incredible. You talked also about insurance, and I've heard that, like, I know an investor who's got almost 200 properties, and he's always raising his umbrella policy like every year as he kind of grows his portfolio. Is that something that can step in? Let's say he was structured incorrectly or he had everything in his personal name. I mean, is that going to step in if he's got a $20 million or a $30 million personal or a personal umbrella policy? How does that work?
Well, there's a lot of things that insurance companies will not cover, right?
Okay.
So let's say that you had, especially, and then this can expand like as you have more property. So like let's say you sold a piece of property and you said that you did XYZ repairs to the house, but then there was some type of confusion about what those repairs were, and then property damage resulted. One of these instances that actually happened is that a client who did some plumbing repairs inside of the house and then sold it. And there was some emails back and forth. And based upon those emails, it was kind of confusing on what exactly the repairs were. Mm-hmm. But in any event, what ended up happening is the plumbing sprung a leak. It was $75,000 in damages to the property because of this leak that had happened because they were on vacation when it happened. And then they came back and tried to sue my client based upon that, and because of the emails there. So the allegation was a fraud allegation. You said the plumbing was replaced here and it wasn't replaced, and because of that, all these damages resulted, right?
Right.
So fraud issue, like that issue, no insurance covers that. Fraud is what's considered an intentional act, right? So then your policy wouldn't cover that kind of that type of scenario, right? Sure. Or if you own the piece of property and then there was an issue with any type of structural piece of the property, right? Like there was some type of mold issue, or if you had a staircase or something like that, and grandma fell through the stairs or fell off the stairs, or the handrail piece came off. Those are all issues with the insurance company. Could either say that they could say that they're outside of the policy by claiming that they're gross negligence or was an intentional act or something like that, right? Finding some reason to exclude coverage. And you find that they always want to exclude coverage, especially when the damages are high, right? Because that's what they can always do. And then you're left having to sue your own insurance company. Oh. But the asset protection system gives you in place. Let's say your guy had those 200 properties. If his insurance company excludes coverage, then somebody can then pursue all 200 of his properties, right? If he has the system I'm recommending to you in place, and somebody say grandma fell through the stairs, or there's a issue with black mold, or for any reason the insurance doesn't work to protect you in that instance, he would only have that one property exposed. So the other 199 and everything he has personally would totally be off the table from what somebody could come after. And that's the peace of mind of a real estate investment asset protection, structure being put in place.
Sure. No, makes sense. No, thanks for answering that question. That's good information. What's your recommendation as far as building a team for your real estate investing?
So you need at least 3 people to make up your team. You need an attorney, a CPA, and a deal maker. So I happen to be an attorney, and I'm a deal maker now, but more like a deal coordinator, because I match myself up with investors that I have as clients and as other people. But I'm not a CPA, right? So that's something that I search for in other people that are really great CPAs, and throughout the country. I would say also that don't think that you have to limit yourself to whoever's local. After you kind of get your feet wet and know a little bit about, you just feel comfortable. Like, can you talk the lingo? Do you know what people are actually getting at? Do you know some questions to ask to be able to find out who's for real and who's not? Then you can start to look nationally. Some of the best CPAs I find, are in, Virginia and California, even though I'm in Texas. And so that's who I'll contract a lot with, because I hire other professionals to advise me all the time. So I would say, but that's what you're going to need, like find out where you fit into there. And likely for most investors, they're going to say, they're probably searching to say, well, I don't really want to learn taxes. I don't really want to learn law. I really kind of want to be a deal maker. And that's cool. You should definitely do that. And to start off with that is to partner with other people that are doing deals. And it's likely going to be the guy that's not telling you about how awesome his returns are that he's making all the time, just as a hint. Those people are usually full of shit. So what you really want to do is go around and like ask people in the group, like who other people in that same group have they done deals with and how many they've done. And so if you find that somebody's done like a bunch of deals with like Brian, and they keep going back to do more and more deals with Brian, then Brian's probably a good guy to do deals with. Because whatever approach Brian's doing, it's consistent and it's working, right? Like if somebody doesn't have a strong track record of doing a bunch of deals with people, then it probably means that they're like a fly-by-night kind of person, or they don't really know what they're doing enough to be able to have that kind of a relationship with a group of investors.
Sure. The fake it till you make it type. You know that.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to invest with those guys when you're starting out, because then you got both of you guys are just faking it, So, I mean, who are you fooling,
No, this is a really huge point that I think we need to talk about a little bit more, because I see this pretty consistently out of the meetup groups that I'm hosting or I'm participating in, is that a lot of investors get into this, or I shouldn't say that, newer people get into real estate investing, and it's like this lone wolf syndrome where they believe that the best way that they're going to, achieve the greatest financial gain is independent. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to flip a house, whatever the situation is. And they go to a group of people and they'll do exactly what you said in the latter part of what your statement was, which is they'll not really have a lot of experience. They might find an opportunity, and then they have this thought process that they're going to be able to convince other investors or other people to assist them in that process. And really, it should be the opposite, like you brought up earlier in the podcast. If you're looking to get started, or you're new to investing, or maybe you're just trying to expand your investing business, I mean, looking for the people in the room that are actually doing deals and having a successful investing, business is where you should be pointing your attention to, because that's how you can learn that process and become experienced, and you're tied to whatever that investment or that project is. For example, you want to invest in a 100-unit apartment building, and maybe you're just investing financially at that point. You're contributing a dollar amount. And in essence, you are a partner on that deal. So when you go to the next opportunity, or maybe you do need to build that credibility with another investor, you can say, well, yeah, I'm partnered on this, 100-unit apartment building. Now, you may have not managed it. You may have not chosen it. You may have just sat by the sidelines and collected a check as a private investor, but you're still a part of that deal, and you learn through that process, and you have some experience, as opposed to just kind of, lone wolfing it, like I said earlier, and not really knowing what you're doing. And I'd really love to have more investors have that type of an attitude of just look for those partnerships, because there's so many great things that can happen when you meet the right people that know how to succeed in this business. So you inspired me to say that. That's a great point.
Awesome, Joe. Well, it's always good to be an inspiration here on Monday mornings.
Yep.
And I am pretty inspirational, but look, I just want to go ahead and just kind of jump on a point that you I think it's really important to kind of put out here to everybody that's experienced or even new, is that the type of way that I'm talking about approaching how do we think about how we're doing the investments doesn't change when you become more experienced, right? All it changes is who I'm targeting. Sure. To be able to partner with deals in, because it's not like I have trouble do with like a single or a small multifamily. I've done enough of those where I can't do it. But like if my new piece is saying, man, I really don't know how to take a C-level 100-unit apartment complex and turn it into a B, right? That might not be a place. Well, I'm going to use the same approach that I'm saying that everybody else that's starting out should be using to be able to get into their first deal. So the way that we're thinking about these things doesn't change as we become better investors. And what that should tell you is that is the way to think, right? To think differently than that is as almost a guaranteed way of saying that you're going to be really okay losing money. And the first rule of this game is to not lose money. I mean, that you can't recover from losing capital, or it's super hard to be able to do that. So
sure.
It's not like if you wanted to get rich doing something, like the real estate investment's probably not the best get rich quick mentality, right? Because there's so much to lose when things go wrong, right? So I would say, to take a more cautious approach and just get really other smart people that you can partner with, so that way you can, bug the hell out of them with a bunch of questions about the deal. Absolutely. Is the best way to go with it. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, people like to be like, man, how many questions are you going to ask over here? And I'd be like, I don't know, but a lot probably. But
right.
into it,
No, great advice. You covered a lot of strategies for real estate investors. Any other type of advanced strategies maybe you'd want to touch on before we get into the next part of the show?
No, I mean, I would just say that here's a great piece of advice too, is hire professionals in really limited amounts. Whenever you're feeling like there's conflicting information between really smart people that get down for like $150 or $100, get a consultation with the CPA or an attorney, and pay a little bit of money for them to then answer like the why behind all of the questions that are going on. Not just their recommendation, but why is the recommendation better? What you're going to find, especially in real estate investment, as well as any other types of investments, when you see like, well, there's two really good points of view here. How do I know which one is right? What's really going on is that there's usually both of those points of views are actually right, depending upon the circumstances.
Sure.
And so what you need to do is hire a professional for a small amount of money to explain to you what is all the whys behind that answer and what are all the assumptions that are going into that answer to make it right in one area versus another.
Sure. Okay. Yeah,
that's a super
sense.
high level answer to like what it is. But like that's the scientist in me. And old Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I watched last night. I'm channeling him right now. So.
Awesome. What's the future hold for Scott Smith? What's the next project you're working on, or what do you see yourself doing in 2018 that the listeners could love to hear about?
Yeah, well, we're doing a lot of podcasts as me being a guest on a lot of different podcasts. And
Awesome.
If you haven't, this podcast has been really great. The Bigger Podcast 109 is a phenomenal place to get more information about me. You'll be seeing my name all over for everybody's guest hosting on a bunch of stuff. We're launching our own podcast, the REI Nerds podcast, where it's me and my attorney and CPA friends geeking out on different deals. We're actually going to be breaking down deals to the nitty gritty of how do we look at it as investors.
Cool.
So it'll be super high value content coming in there for people. And we're going to be, we serve clients nationally, right? So this is part of our big push is to say, like, how are we going to move from, being a pretty, decent sized firm with a few attorneys and support staff into saying that we're really going to be on a major player, shaking things up, because we think a lot of the old ways of doing things are pretty loose right now. And we think that we have better ideas and can stand behind them and shoot them. So I'm happy to have that debate with just anybody. Sure. If anybody's thinks they got better ideas or a better approach, let's have the debate. Let's get to the bottom of it and flush everything out to the nth degree.
Right. No, totally. That's awesome. The podcast, when's that going to be launched?
So hopefully here in a couple weeks. So we're hoping by mid-February is where we're going to finally have the first 8 episodes up and go ahead and get that rocking and rolling. And there'll be a combination in that podcast between here's stories about investors to like have fables almost of each, and those will be like 5 or 6 minute clips. And then, once a month or so, we'll have these major podcasts that'll come down for all of our subscribers that they'll actually get like the deal ahead of time with us so they can look at it. And then it'll be a live cast with me and my attorney professional friends that other people can ask questions about while we're going through it. So it'll be this really interactive live consultation with that would weigh like over a few $1,000s an hour if you actually had to hire
Sure, right.
These guys. I'm not that expensive, but my friends are. Holy smokes, do they like to charge for their time?
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome. I'm pretty excited to hear. I'm pretty excited to be able to subscribe to that. So I'm assuming it's going to be available on iTunes and Stitcher and YouTube and Google Play and all the familiar places. Yeah,
it'll be out there. The REI Nerds podcast, and
awesome.
Yeah, you'll be able to find it everywhere. But you can go ahead and hit up our website, or email me or call us, and then we can get you on the list for that to make sure you don't miss it out.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, we're going to give out the website here at the end of the podcast. Well, I have one more question. What type of books are you reading right now? What's on the nightstand?
Well, I got a lot of different things. I'm actually reading this really cool book right now on the microbiome diet. Okay. Have you heard of that stuff? Did you know like most of your body is made out of bacteria? So and this whole thing around all of your health is fundamentally based on what goes on inside of your gut. Like your gut actually produces more of sleep chemicals to be able to help your body and your brain regenerate than your actual brain does. So they call it your second brain. So like doing little simple things like eating fermented foods like sauerkraut or kimchi have these huge upticks in how much nutrient absorption you get, as well as how good your sleep is, how your brain works, and how smart you are every day, right? Really? So this book is like blowing my mind about like, holy shit, like this is something that takes like 30 seconds for me in the morning to have like a couple forkfuls of sauerkraut, which I think is gross, but But it's like a little thing I can do that has like this massive uptick into everything else in my life. And those are kind of things I really tend to like, like what are like little tiny things that I can do that have like huge payoffs and dividends. And I'm climbing Kilimanjaro in March. So wow. I think that just put me on this like huge health kick because like I'm pretty overweight right now, but I'm getting back in shape. But I got out of shape, man. I just stopped working out. Right. So I'm back into it now. Then I'm back on my health kick, and I've been working out really hard for the last couple of months. So I'm gonna make it to the top of Kili.
That's
I'm
good,
not gonna
man.
let it take you down. But,
good for you. See, that's
yeah.
one of those 2018, goals or whatever I was asking about. That's pretty cool. I don't know anybody who climbed that mountain, so maybe we should get a follow up on that one once your podcast is launched and see how things are going and how the climb went. That'd be cool.
Yeah, definitely, man. 19,500 feet down in Tanzania.
Wow.
If anybody else is swinging out March 3rd, I'll see you there.
How long do you anticipate that taking? Is it one day?
It's a 10-day trek.
10 day. That's what I figured. It was like a week. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good for you.
It'd be pretty cool. They hire Sherpas and they carry all your stuff. It's like real rogue. I'm stoked about it.
Awesome. You're going to be totally off the grid then, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I guess possibly you could reach me, but that would be really impressive. I'd be surprised to be what message that would be that would need that.
Yeah, we'll have to have a message in a bottle dropped off by an Amazon drone like the top of the mountain, and then you'll have to send another drone back to reply. No, that's awesome. So the microbiome diet. I said that right. Okay, and that's a book you're reading right now about the second brain and all those organisms in your body that I've heard about as well that make you smarter, which is cool. I got to check that out myself. And climbing the mountain, that sounds awesome. So a lot of great information. LLCs and land trusts, and you reinforced a lot of the things that I think investors need to think about before they actually jump in and buy their own properties, or things that they can change now, obviously, if they're not structured correctly. My next natural question, and I think what everyone's begging to hear, is how do people get in touch with you if they want to utilize your services or just connect and get some answers to some questions that might have been created out of this podcast?
Yeah, so we have the website, royallegalsolutions.com, and you can connect with us through the contact us. You can email me at scott@royallegalsolutions.com. You can also call us at 512-757-3994. And Joe, I think we also have some freebies that we're doing to give away to everybody, and all of our contact information is going to be inside of those freebies, like the top 10 things you need to do to protect your assets, et cetera.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So I want the top 10 things I need to know to protect my assets. So just shoot you an email to get it. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you can shoot me an email to get it, or if you come onto the website, you're able to download it for free.
Oh, okay.
And we're also going to send it to you, so that way if you wanted to send it out to the user base at the same time we're launching the podcast here, that everybody be able to have that.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate that. And that's where they'd also find out about your REI Nerds podcast, right? They just go to the Royal Legal Solutions website. Okay.
Yeah, anything about me, go to the website. You'll be able to find it.
Awesome. I really appreciate you being on the show today. I a lot of good information here. Inspirational, as I said earlier, because now I'm like, oh man, we got to hang up and I got to call you back. We got to talk about my situation then, because I got to do some restructuring here. That's a 2018 goal. I started it last year. In 2017, I got I'm not going to say how many, but I got a bunch of deeds sitting on a table right now that I'm like, okay, I got to transfer all these into different, essentially land trusts like you described, but I need to get the entities structured up correctly first. So I know that our listener base really appreciates what you've explained, and I appreciate you taking the time today. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, really great to be here, and thanks for being such an awesome host and letting me kind of just go wherever I wanted to with everything. And we always looking to help, whoever I can. So if there's anything, I'd love to come back on the show and do a follow-up with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
After I'm back from Kili.
Yeah, after you're back from there, and then maybe after I get some of my stuff set up through you, because that sounds incredible. And I know you're going to be getting some interest from the listener base to try to get themselves structured correctly, because that's just good information. Well, man,
awesome.
I will touch base with you soon. Thanks for being on the show, and take care.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. Be sure to tune in next week for another empowering episode. We welcome your feedback, so please rate us on iTunes and Stitcher, and visit us at www.investoремpowermentchicago.com or TanisGroupRealty.com.